BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
We've been looking at the case of baby C, a boy who was born in June 2015, 10 weeks premature and weighing just under 2 pounds. Letby was found guilty of deliberately injecting air into the child's stomach via his feeding tube. Key to the prosecution's case was that baby C was stable and that his collapse at almost 4 days old had been unexpected. But 5 different neonatologists have told File on 4 there were signs baby C was in trouble before then.
I'm Colin Morley. I've been a paediatrician for about 50 years and specialised towards the end in the care of sick babies, particularly premature babies. I worked in Addenbrooke's Hospital in the University of Cambridge, done quite a lot of research related to breathing problems, and I went to Melbourne for 10 years as Professor of Neonatal Medicine.
Professor Morley is a world-renowned expert in neonatology. This is the first time he's spoken about the Letby case. He didn't attend the trial, but he's reviewed the evidence heard in court about the care that baby C received.
Baby C was an extremely small baby, so this baby really needed intensive care. The baby was not in the right hospital. The baby started vomiting black fluid, bile, probably with digested blood. That's a very serious sign, although they didn't seem to appreciate that. And the x-rays showed dilated bowel with a lot of gas, particularly in the stomach and the upper intestine. I think they failed to recognise that the baby had a bowel obstruction, which was causing the problems. And that needed urgent surgical opinion and probably surgery to save the baby's life.
You're saying quite clearly here you believe this baby died of natural causes. How confident are you of that?
I'm very confident because of what I've read. Bile-stained vomiting, that means intestinal obstruction until not proved. The x-ray showing distended bowel, that means bowel obstruction. And I don't see any reason to come up with a very strange hypothesis that somebody forced gas into the stomach through the nasogastric tube enough to kill the baby. There was plenty other things going on that would mean the baby wasn't going to survive if he didn't have the proper treatment.
Baby C's size and prematurity put him at the limit of what the Countess of Chester could care for. Professor Morley says a consultant should have been examining this child several times a day.
This baby certainly should have had higher level of care. They're tricky and they deteriorate, and you need to be able to keep an eye on things to see what's going on. The consultant didn't see the baby for the first 3 days. He was seen by nurses and trainee doctors.
It was in the middle of Lucy Letby's night shift that baby C collapsed. Doctors tried to resuscitate him, but they couldn't.
This and other cases to do with Lucy Letby I've looked at, I got the feeling that the resuscitation was suboptimal. The people's skills were not up to the job of resuscitating a tiny baby like this. And that's not surprising. I mean, it sounds very critical, but this was a hospital that wasn't really set up for a baby as small and sick as this baby. By the time the baby was intubated 20 minutes later, it would have deteriorated significantly.
This medical evidence was reviewed and peer-reviewed by a team of medical experts, paediatricians, radiologists, and a pathologist, and it was considered in great detail. So it's quite a statement for you to make that they've simply got it wrong.
Looking after and diagnosing very premature baby, 800 grams is extraordinarily tiny. They just were out of their depth. And instead of going for the diagnosis, which was, just bile-stained vomiting, the baby's got intestinal obstruction, don't need much more than that. The x-ray was absolutely classical of a baby who got a lower bowel obstruction.
The pathologist who took the stand for the prosecution said there was no bile obstruction found in the post-mortem.
Well, clinically, the baby did have a bowel obstruction. I'm devastated for the families. There's nothing worse than losing your precious baby. And they've been told that the baby was murdered by Lucy Letby, which is awful. But, my job is to tell the truth about what I think has happened. I just don't believe this wild hypothesis based on no evidence whatsoever that somebody inflated the stomach enough to kill the baby.
Letby's defence team did argue that baby C could have been suffering from a bowel obstruction, which doctors had failed to spot. But this was rejected by the prosecution's expert witnesses, including Dewi Evans.
No, I don't think his collapse was a result of a bowel obstruction. What baby C did have was an infection, and the blood markers were consistent with infection. His case, from a clinical point of view, was the most difficult because he was very small. But he was doing satisfactorily, as well as could be expected, and therefore his collapse and failure of resuscitation was unexpected. But the biggest concerns was that the X-ray showed a huge, great bubble in the stomach and also far more gas than I would expect.
This X-ray was one of the key pieces of evidence in this case. In pre-trial reports, Dr. Evans and other expert witnesses said it was evidence that air had most likely been pumped deliberately into the baby's stomach via his feeding tube. Pathologist Dr. Andreas Marnarides told the court these reports, which referenced the X-ray, helped him form his opinion that Letby killed the baby using this method. But during the trial, it transpired that Lucy Letby wasn't working on the 12th of June when the X-ray was taken. She hadn't been on shift since before baby C was born. In his summing up, the judge made it clear to the jury that this X-ray had been taken the day before baby C collapsed, though he didn't remind them that Letby hadn't been on shift. I think it's clear that Letby hadn't met the baby by that stage, had she?
I don't know. She was certainly there when he died.